Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into the world of virtual reality by learning how to implement stereo rendering in Unity. This technique is fundamental to creating immersive 3D experiences as it simulates realistic depth perception for the user. In this tutorial, we'll build a stereo pair using two parallel cameras, one for each eye, and we'll cover two critical concepts: interpupillary distance, or IPD, which is the distance between your eyes, and zero parallax value, which determines the screen depth. By the end, you'll have a fully functional demo where you can adjust these values in real time. So, before we start, make sure that you have the Unity Hub, a recent version of the Unity editor, and three scripts mentioned in this tutorial, and I will include those in the link in the description. First, let's open up our project. So we're going to open up Unity Hub and create a new project using just the regular 3D built-in render pipeline template. Name it whatever you'd like. I've already named it VR Tutorial Stereo Rendering. And the editor version that I'll be using today is 6000.2.8 F1, but use whatever one is available to you. So once your Unity editor finally loads up, we're going to do a couple initialization things within our project. So inside our asset folder, it's good practice to create folders for a material, textures, and scripts. And the scripts I've already slid into this folder, but make sure that you just put your scripts into this folder already. So next, let's build a simple environment. Let's just add a floor by creating a 3D plane object in the hierarchy here. We're going to make sure the position's at 0, 0, and 0, and we can scale it up to something like 5 by 5 by 5. I already made some textures in here, so let's just put this weird cyan color into the plane, just to give it a bit of color. Ooh, maybe I don't like that. Let's do the blue one here instead. It's just as bad, but that's okay. So this gives us some space. To give our scene some depth, we'll create a empty game object and call it scene objects. And under that, let's add just some 3D objects. It could literally be anything here. We'll add it. So I've placed my scene objects kind of just apart. You can select all of them and hit Control D, and then move them around again. Hit Control D again, just to populate our scene. You can really do it however you'd like, but this is just so that we can get a little bit of depth. So with our scene set, can minimize our scene objects object here to give our hierarchy a little bit more space. Let's time to create the player controller and the camera rig. So first, we need to find a custom layer for our stereo textures. So we can really just select any object, go up to here in this layer, and add a layer. I actually already added the stereo texture into user layer 6, so I would just do that. But just make sure it's just called stereo texture. Now that we're done with that, let's go to add another empty game object and call it player controller. And we're going to set its position to 0, 1, and -10. And we're going to add a character controller component to it. Next, let's make another empty object, but let's make this one a child of the player controller object. And we're going to name it camera group. And we're going to position it to 0.5. And we're going to drag the main camera from the scene under the camera group here. Drag it on top of it. There you go. We're now going to rename our main camera to left eye. We're going to click Control D to duplicate it, and then we'll name this right eye. The left eye, we're going to just position it to -0.05, which will be for our left eye. And for our right eye, we're going to put it to 0.05. So back in our left eye, we need to tell it to ignore our stereo display planes that we'll make in a second here. So in our left camera inspector, we'll find the culling mask, and we're going to deselect the stereo texture layer we just created. And while we're here as well, we can delete our audio listener component here, as we only need one. And we'll do the same thing for the right eye. So we'll find our culling mask and deselect the stereo texture. So for our right eye, we're going to go to the output section and put it to display 2, as we will have two different displays for our cameras. Next, we're going to create virtual screens that our cameras will project onto. So outside of the camera group, we're going to create a new empty object and call it stereo group. So once we made our stereo group, we're going to put the position to 0, 5, and 0.5. And our rotation, so they'll be vertical, 90, 0, and 180. Then within this, we can create a plane, and we can call it plane dash left eye. We're going to position this so it's going to be 5, 0, and 0. And then we're going to click the left eye. We're also going to remove the mesh collider. This is important, so as we move around in the scene, this won't mess us up because we will actually collide into the plane that we have created, but we don't want to do that. So we'll remove the component, and then once we're done with this, we can Control D. Let's rename this to right eye, and we'll finally set the layer for both of these planes to the stereo texture that we created. So next, we need to create render textures for our cameras to output to. So in our textures folder, I've already created these, but let's create them again. We're going to go to create, we're going to go to rendering, and then we're going to create render texture. So real quick, let's change the texture to 2048 by 2048. Enter. And then we're going to quickly just duplicate this, and we're going to rename both of these texture dash left eye and texture dash right eye. Now let's link everything together. Select the left camera, or the left eye, sorry. Find the output texture field, which is at the bottom here. We're going to put our left texture into that, and we will do the same for the right eye or right camera, and drag the right texture into the output texture on the right eye. Now, finally, we can apply these textures to our plane, and we'll apply the textures to it as well. And you'll see that it'll actually display some stuff here. We'll do the same for the right eye. So you'll see there's it's like a little bit off-centered, and that's what we want. Some people run into the issue of these not displaying. You want to make sure that if you aren't able to display this, you just change the shader to lit to unlit within the universal render pipeline, and that should fix your issues. And we're almost done. We just need one last camera to view our two stereo planes that are here. So we can create a new camera object, name it to stereo camera, and we're going to change the projection to orthographic. We're also going to change the size to about 4.5. Sometimes you might have to mess around with this, but 4.5 seems to work most of the time. And this is just so the two planes fit together in the view. So now for the fun part, adding the controls. So we can select our player controller object, and we can drag the scripts earlier, the IPD script, onto the player controller. And this will actually add the left and right cameras. So we can drag our left eye onto the left camera and the right eye onto the right camera. Now we can also add the zero parallax controller to the player controller. And this will actually need a reference to our stereo camera. So we can drag our stereo camera into that. And that should be it. Forgot about one thing to tell you. So in the build profiles, since these scripts are using a bit of an older version, we'll probably have to update this down the line. If you head to project settings, go to player, in other settings, scroll down until you get to active input handling. Make sure to just change it to old if you're using these scripts. That will allow you to use kind of this older player controller script. And from there, you can click play, and you should be able to move around with the mouse and WAS and D. And now, if you click O or P, that actually increases or decreases the distance between the left and right cameras, adjusting the IPD. And if you click K or L, this actually increases or decreases the size of the orthographic camera, which adjusts the zero parallax plane. And there you have it. You successfully implemented a dual camera stereo rendering system in Unity. You can now see how adjusting the interpupillary distance and zero parallax plane dramatically changes the perception of depth in game. And this is just the foundation for creating compelling and comfortable VR experiences. So thanks for following along. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a like. Happy developing.